Davenport.
Here.
We have a quorum. We have one public speaker, Mr. Godoldig Petrovsky.
Will you please say your name so we all know how to say it?
Thank you. Then I expect extra time.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, honorable commissioners, and other interested parties. I'm Mark Godoldig-Petrovsky. At last month's meeting, there was discussion about the repower delays. There was a little small mention in public session about some considerations relative to the continuation of the contract, although you did have the option under its provisions to terminate it. And the fact that you did not choose to exercise that option is not what bothers me. What bothers me is the thumb on the scale of certain political individuals. The governor and Senator Cosgrove from Chesapeake, who had intervened in the deliberations, or who had expressed their opinions. Now, since a substantial number of the members of this board are gubernatorial appointees, as somebody pointed out in the course of the meeting, the voice of the governor rings rather loudly in all of their ears. To me, what should be the overriding consideration in terms of moving forward with the contract is whether it makes sense and whether it serves the best interests of the residents of this region who are served by this body. And the governor is entitled to his opinion. Senator Cosgrove is entitled to his opinion, but they should not outweigh the best interests of the public he serves. So I am concerned that in the ongoing discussions, you keep in mind who the primary clients are. And I make no judgment at this point as to whether the repower contract will best serve my interests, because relevant information is being discussed out of my sight and out of my hearing. I don't want to prejudge based on inadequate information. But I believe you have a responsibility to bring that information into the public arena so that we can all assess the quality of the job that you're doing as our representatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
That's all.
Okay, is that part of it? All right, where's the lead-off batter?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Wheelabrator report for the month of February. Total waste received since it was 31,662 tons. Waste delivered to the RDF facility was 52,171 tons. RDF process was 51,073 tons. Ash sent to the regional landfill was 12,621 tons. And opportunities, and two of those that I kind of wanted to talk about today. One of them was a sequencing of the trucks, so that when we looked at our other facilities and we look at how the waste is routed to the floor, it comes in basically in two different vehicles. One would be a walking floor trailer, a SPSA trailer. And the other one would be a route truck, something like a rear packer, that comes and does direct delivery to the facility. And we've had success in our other facilities with kind of matching these styles together so that we would form two lines essentially and bring a platoon, a group of SPSA trailers and walking floor trailers together as a group, and then move through a volume of the route trucks. And by doing that, we think that we can move the floor along a little more efficiently and help reduce some of those wait times. The other thing that, when I was, just observing, sometimes you have to just watch and observe and spend some time on the tipping floor to see how the flow of traffic goes. And one of the things that concerned me was the safety of the citizens that access the tipping floor. And I did provide a letter to the board that I asked them to review, but really what it comes down to is we have citizens on the tipping floor, and first of all, I'm concerned for their overall safety. When I have them on this floor, there's limited space with the waste that's there, and then we can have anywhere up to 6 SPSA trailers, and I can have 2 or 3 loaders on the floor. And during that time, it's hard to keep track of an individual that doesn't have any experience in an industrial setting. So I've requested that we remove the citizens from access in the RDS tipping floor with the idea that, just their safety in mind. And, when I was watching two individuals with a minivan pulling couches off, and it just really concerns me that we'll have an incident at some point in the future where we have somebody impacted, hurt, and potentially killed, as happened at other transfer stations with professionals, not only just citizens. So thank you. I just made the request, and I think there had been some discussion. Maybe I'll just give you an opportunity to ask questions, or if you have concerns about that.
Do you have anything you want to add to that? Tony? Do you have anything you want to add?
Good morning, Chairman, Board. I just want to add to the fact that we did have a meeting, and since that meeting, the time has improved. Communication between RDL and us has improved, so the efforts have been made.
I do want to let you know that we do feel like that we can support, and have already notified him of supporting of the way in which he brings different trucks in, as he mentioned in his first item there. We did feel like that was important for if there was any discussion that needed to be held probably today with the board regarding the removal of citizens from the RDF floor. We know always has been a safety issue. It is at all transfer stations. Currently, we do not allow citizens to use Oceana, and citizens are only allowed to use Norfolk transfer station when on Saturday afternoons, Sunday afternoons, and the city of Norfolk actually pays separately for that particular use of tipping floor.
Any comments? Yes, sir.
Does it, in a little bit of discussion, but share it with the board, hopefully not stepping out of line with Jake, but is there something that we could do to put a 40-yard container on the outside and keep John Q. Public, the citizen
concern, but I don't think he's the same, you know, as concerned that there's other outlets available to the citizens that are a reasonable distance away.
I know that years ago, and I'm not, Chairman, not familiar with what they do today, because I'm not out there. I know that years ago, we used to allow people to come to our compound and use a little container there instead of going to the RDF plant. And obviously, it's easier if they go there and just get rid of their car level or the pickup truck level than it is to push it into a 40-yard container. But it looks like there could be some options there for us all to work together to make a smoother situation, but make it easier for Portsmouth trucks and the other your trucks to get in and out. I've been to the transfer station in Suffolk enough to know that you can unload 3 or 4 trucks while you're trying to get one pickup truck unloaded. So I think that's something that we really need to look at.
And maybe we look at it, and one other thought we had is, you know, kind of do some limitation on hours, so that, you know, Saturday is our a day where there's less traffic, it's a shorter day for us, and maybe that's another alternative, is limiting the hours of access to the facility. You know, during the midweek, you know, that's our largest, highest volume of traffic, and maybe that would be another alternative, so we could look at those alternatives as well.
Look, you've had one meeting, knock down our overtime, we want to continue that, we want you to have more meetings and come up with suggestions that we continue to improve that operation. Because paying $100,000 for overtime to wait to stay.
We will say that, as Tony mentioned, the wait times are getting better. Of course, this is March.
Slow period.
Right.
It's a slow period, so we're still waiting eagerly to see how it goes this summer.
Mr. Councilman.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Mr. McCoy's comments. I think the situation where you have citizens going on the tipping floor, have large trucks there is inherently dangerous. That led to Norfolk, where we opened the transfer station on weekends for free disposal by citizens. I know in other authorities, they have drop-off sites where there's a ramp where citizens can drive the truck up and throw it into the container. But I would encourage SPSA to look into some alternatives there, because there is a danger with some citizens on the tipping floor with these heavy trucks.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Mr. Executive Director.
March, we did not have any landfill or other issues at the landfill. Sorry about that. Roof replacement at the landfill operations building has been probably 99.9% complete. Gas bore system that was installed at Landstown is complete. We are looking also at one in Isle of Wight, and that's set to begin soon. Roll-up doors, we had to replace at the Norfolk transfer station, and they will be completed also. So they had them up, they had some issues with one, and they had to order some other packages for it, so that's in the process of being done now. Jeff Murray with HDR will address the leachate project later on in the agenda. Conditional use permit rezoning application for sale 7. Suffolk has indicated that the application will not be going to the planning commission until the DEQ has issued its final actions as far as the leachate issue at the landfill. We anticipate yesterday, Jeff may bring this up, yesterday we did receive a notice of violation, and they've asked for a second meeting with the SPSA staff and engineers so that they can go over and we'll look at what other type of action would be taken. So hopefully that will be done in the not too distant future, so that we can get back on track with the planning commission and the Suffolk City Council. Repower South, you have a copy of the monthly report that's in the agenda. Just a couple of things to bring out. They have received initial draft terms from the Outtake partner, and they are negotiating. The Outtake partner has again affirmed that they feel like March the 31st, this month in other words, we should have an Outtake agreement at least very close to its final stages, and then the execution they're hoping by still by mid that process seems to be moving along. I know they have meetings this afternoon with all the departments. Chesapeake Recycling Days, this is the information that was provided for that. I think you do have the information on your packet. The only thing I would like to add, if you notice, I didn't have anything regarding commercial solid waste. That will be brought up more trade later, but just wanted to let you know that it appears that hopefully next week we will be meeting with the two proposals at that particular time. And hopefully we're still aiming for having something so that we can make a recommendation to the full board for an award at the April meeting. That's, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, with respect to the Suffolk permit, I mean, at one point this was going to be going to the Suffolk Planning Commission last October, and it's delayed. Now, my question respectfully is, are there some major issues remaining here that are causing this continual delay?
No, I think, and Patrick, you want to follow Patrick?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that by saying the leachate issue is a major issue of concern for Suffolk, and it should be a major issue of concern for SPSA. That's how I've best answered that.
And a lot of the questions will be answered once the EQ provides that direction for what can be done, when can be done, and all of that thing. So planning commission, think, wanted that information at their hand instead of guessing at it what it might be. So that was one of the main reasons for holding on.
Mr. Chairman, having read the report that was sent out by Mrs. Strickland last week, I've been in business long enough to know that this is not a situation that's going to go away quickly. And I don't know what quickly means. I don't know if it means years, 18 months, if it means 5 years. But whatever it is, we need to make sure that that we handle, or by the time we get into the budget system, we're a little bit better off probably than some cities in that regard, in that we charge our citizens a full charge for disposal of waste. Some cities don't. So I was just, have we got some idea down the road of what kind of money we're talking about to cover in the long term? It seems like that SPSA staff is starting to get their hands on some issues. Some of the leachate levels have gone down, which is a good indication. Continuation is important. Maybe we have a little bit more understanding as to either.
I believe Jeff is going to be hitting some of that soon and in his report. And I know we have some of those considerations in the upcoming budget that will be presented next month. So if you could, hopefully that will answer Mr. Kiner.
Yeah, with respect to the leachate, I know we're going to get a presentation, and I know it's important to look forward, but I think it is important that we understand what happened with the leachate. I have some questions here that I'm giving you, Bucky, but I'd like to get some answers by the next meeting. I'll go through them. The SPSA landfill is permitted by DEQ. What does the permit say about leachate levels in the landfill, and what record keeping and reporting is required? Second, how frequently does SPSA report to DEQ on the landfill, and what has been reported in the past 5 years regarding the leachate collection and monitoring system? And when has DEQ inspected the landfill, and did those inspections identify any issues with the leachate collection and monitoring system? Next one, SPSA has an engineering consultant evaluate its operations each year, including the landfill. What have those reports said about the leachate collection and monitoring system, and were any problems identified? Next, when did HRSD change the quantity of allowable discharge from the landfill? What correspondence occurred between SPSA and HRSD? And what analysis was done on the adequacy of the discharge limits? With respect to the landfill, when was the last record or recollection of employees when the leachate monitoring system was operating, were leachate levels recorded in the past? Is there any record of notification of problems or requests for repairs to the leachate monitoring system? describe the certifications and training required for SPSA staff to manage the landfill, and are there any unmet requirements?
Give those questions to the executive director
I just did.
this morning.
Yes.
Why
Yeah,
didn't
I don't expect an answer right away, but.
Why didn't you do it earlier? See, to me, that's operational questions. You're asking operational questions, not policy questions. You're asking specific operational questions. Those questions should have been directed to this gentleman. The things you've asked are all good questions. I have no problem with the questions. I understand it because I'm an operations individual. But they should have been directed toward him first, and he could have had answers for you. Or wait until the engineer. I think he's going to answer some, but maybe not in the detail that I think they should be. I think it's the executive director's position to do that. And I would appreciate it with those type of questions. They aren't policy questions. We know we've got a problem with the landfill. We know we're going to fix the problem with the landfill. To me, as I said to a couple of board members earlier, what we're doing now is just trying, the way I look at it, very simply, schedule the best way to get the water out in the fastest way we can do it. You know, so that's very simply put, that's what I said. We all recognize it was a problem.
I understand.
But those type of things,
Yes, sir.
give the gentleman a chance to do. Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
I don't have operational questions. I have policy-related questions. Okay, so I've been giving this some thought, and I'm surprised, like most of the board members are, that we have this problem, because we were unaware of it. So here's my policy kind of questions. I want to kind of start with setting the stage. I worked for a long time for the Army, and the Army has a thing called CCIR. Let me break that down for us. It's called Command Critical Information Requirements. Well, what does that mean in English? In English, that means when a commander comes in, he has certain things he is very interested in. And he sets up a table, a list of things that are informational requirements that are critical. They're critical. Okay? So we just heard the report from the executive director of the status of the landfill and other associated things. Right? So what we talked about when we had our update is we talked about 4 items, one of which was odors. Okay? And typically what we hear at the board level is things like odors and complaints and what we're painting and stuff like that. Okay? I want to suggest that we develop a list of critical information requirements. I think this board needs to have, on a monthly basis, a listing of things that are critical to the operation of our landfill. And we can dumb it down for us, and we can do it as a stoplight chart, red, yellow, green, you know. But we missed the leachate because it wasn't an informational critical requirement that we knew about. So I want to suggest to the board that we create, and I most certainly don't have the expertise to create it myself, but we create a list of things that board members need to know about on a monthly basis. And it could be, even when Wheelabrator does their briefing, it's much more detailed than what we get about our own landfill. So I would like to have more information on a monthly basis about what's critical to our landfill. And maybe what we really need to do, and again, this is getting to how, I'm asking what, but the how may be grabbing a consultant or grabbing someone that isn't currently working with us at the landfill so it's not jaded. We get the 10 things, the 20 things, the stoplight charted, and then the board has a better understanding and appreciation that we're doing the right thing. So that's my thought. Information critical requirements, and I think that would take us a long way and possibly prevent future issues. So there are my thoughts, board, Mr. Chairman and board. I'd like us to move down that path.
Comments?
I'd like to echo what Bill said. I think that's really important. And not having sat in his seat, sat in the executive director's seat, but sat in the city manager's seat, and I'll speak for, I think, some experience with the city manager. It really doesn't make any difference what avenue the information comes to the executive director. He could pass it on to them, but I think sometimes this group needs to know what other members of the agency is thinking. And if people like John's got key issues that he didn't think of those entirely by himself, he had some help. They do need to be shared, and I think they need to be shared in an environment like this. That's important.
Mr. Chairman, along the same lines, I do want to thank Mr. Kuiper for the questions. I think the questions are very helpful, and I do think, given all the information we've been receiving over the last couple of months, I think the questions are very well framed and well timed. I think as a courtesy, he did share those with Mr. Taylor, the executive director, and I only took it as a courtesy to the board that he read those questions aloud just for our benefit. So it seems like you may have been trying to admonish John for the way he did that, but I'm very grateful for the questions that you posed, and along the lines of what Mr. Sorrentino stated. Perhaps when we get the presentation today from HDR, perhaps we could have an opportunity to talk about what level of detailed information we should be receiving to follow up on this, because as stated, it is a major issue for the board. It does have some implications for the pending CUP and rezoning application, and I think it should continue to be a major issue for the organization. Thank you.
I think if you remember, the City of Virginia Beach asked certain questions, and those questions were answered in the all board. And we would anticipate that this would be done with this and any other action that we take. So it's, the procedure already set up to do that and provide information.
Go back here, Mr. Roberts. Say that again to me. You think I did what?
I believe I just heard you admonish a board member for putting some very well-timed and very well-framed questions that we should be discussing as a board. I took your comments as an admonition.
Okay, that's well said. Don't believe it, but it's well said. I have seen on numerous occasions, board members have asked questions that weren't really policy questions. And we have gotten into the day-to-day operations of things that I just don't believe that we belong into. I believe it's this man's job. Now, if we don't think this man is doing the job, and we as a board have the availability to make that change. And anything I said was said in those lines. So I totally take exception to what you say, disagree with you very adamantly. Okay? All right, what else? Go ahead. Anybody?
I agree with Patrick completely. I think what he said was very relevant, and I'd like to say I think this board does have policy oversight, but also has oversight of operations as well. I think this board has a certain accountability, so I think the questions that were asked were relevant questions, you know, and things that have been discussed at the last meeting, so I concur with Mr. Robbins.
Good.
I'll second that.
Second.
As far as what your comments were, why don't you take that banner, and we'll put, Mr. McCoy, you have an interest in it, why don't you too go ahead with that, take that banner and carry it. I think that'd be a good thing. You've got an interest in it, and so do you. You seem to have an interest in it. We'll take that banner and make a report back to us. I think it's a great idea. I have no problem with that at all.
I'd be happy to accept that.
You've been assigned. So
Noted.
unless you've got a
Accepted.
problem, you've been assigned.
What do you guys?
You're going to CC.
Work with Mr. Sorrentino to come up with this, whatever that end was.
I'm going to take an exception to that. I don't think that's necessary. I think you've got.
Well, who else do you think was, how do you think was?
I've got the floor now. You've asked me, and I'm.
Oh, you're not on.
It's 16 people around the board that makes decisions. Not me, not Mr. Roberts, not Bill Sorrentino. And I think, I don't know what kind of environment that you've worked in, but I've worked in everything you've been working in city government. And I will tell you, the city manager of the city will take more help from citizens from an operations standpoint than he'll ever deal with policies. And when we get so big, we deal with enough in policy here, we have lost sight of what our true responsibility is, and that's operations. It starts at the ground up. And I'm not going to accept that responsibility. I don't need to sit down and bill and come up with something that 16 people should be doing, not just me. And I think you want to say too much about it.
How do you suggest we would go forward with this?
Just like Mr. John Piper just presented, he presented from his city staff questions and concerns about the landfill. He did it in an open session to this body. It will be presented to the executive director, and Bucky will respond to his questions either before or the next meeting, and we will all get a copy of it. That's all we need to do.
Well, I don't think that's what Mr. Sorrentino is getting at. I think
No,
he's
it's not
more
what I'm
different.
saying. No. What I'm getting at is, I would like the board to have a report on a monthly basis from the executive director on the critical issues that will be on a standard monthly basis on all the things that we ought to know about that landfill. One of them, let me give you for instance, on that list would be something like, is the SCADA system working? Red, yellow, or green? And if it's red, someone's going to say, hey Bucky, what the hell's going on? Why is it red? And what are you doing about it? And maybe it's going to say something like leachate level. And it's going to say, in this case, it'd be red. There's 20 feet of it. Well, we would have known about it when it was 3 feet, because it would have been red at 3 feet instead of being red at 20 feet. So I'm thinking there is a list of things that we should have a report on the executive director that gives us a status on our landfill. Because we haven't gotten that report, because we didn't know, I got the city of Suffolk over here telling us, well, I don't know about the CUP amendment for cell number 7, because we didn't know what we didn't know. I want to know. I feel like as board members, we all have a responsibility to know. Look, we have approved tire derimmers. We've approved tire shredders. We've approved backhoe, just, we do it. If we would have known the SCADA system wasn't working, we would have said, damn it, fix it, go buy it. We would have approved it, but we didn't know. So I want to learn something from this and come up with a dashboard of things that are critical for us to know about. And we'll review it on a monthly basis.
I'll accept it.
How's that? Is that good? Now, will you work with me now?
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. Well, together we'll figure it out. Okay, there's a lot of smart people in the back row and all around us that can help us with this. Thank you, sir.
Work with staff on it. and get it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Because if you look at these things over the last 6, 7 years, these are the problem areas that had come up. And that's why he's reporting on them. We instructed him to report on them. Those are things that were problems over the last few years. So, hey, everything can be improved. I got a problem with that at all. Okay. All right, we done with this one? All right, minutes, board meeting, February 22nd. Everybody see them? I hear a motion that February 22nd, 2017 minutes of the Citizen Board of Directors meeting be approved as presented.
So no move.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Financial matters.
For the month ending February 28th, 2017, total revenues exceeded total expenses by approximately $2.9 million, as compared to a shortfall of approximately $1.5 million in the previous year. Tipping fees reflect a 14% increase, or approximately $3.2 million, as compared to this time last year, and the increase is due to the end of the asset residue agreement. Really looking forward to not having to say that each year. To July. Well, I have to give you a reason why it's an increase. And municipal waste tonnages through February are up less than 1%, or about 956 tons. As you can see here, where the yellow arrow is pointing to, blue dot. Certainly we didn't dip down in February in years past, so it's a good sign. and if that's not right, it didn't say the number.
No, that was all right.
It was 900 and some tons less, that's what it was. Sorry. Total expenses as of February 28th were approximately $31.7 million compared to $29.6 in the prior fiscal year. Nothing really else out of the ordinary to report on the expenses. A total of $3.1 million has been applied as credits from the tip fee stabilization fund to localities' invoices for the month of January and February. We just have one little amount that's remaining, and that will be, so basically all the tip fee stabilization money has been credited back. Cash balances were $24.3 million, and they're designated as follows. Not a whole lot of change. The fiscal year 18 proposed budget, as mentioned earlier, we will be presenting that in April. But as there are many variables to consider for the upcoming fiscal year, and we will be recommending that the municipal tip fee remain at $125 effective July 1st. But the plan is to do a revised budget once more of our variables are no longer variable, or more of the unknowns become known, if you know what I mean. And so we would plan on, if I bring you another budget, I'm guessing like end of August, to go ahead and of course, it would be dropping the tipping fee come January 25th, when the use and support agreements start. That would just give us more time to get more of our variables solved. You know, the repower, the leachate, all of those things. So I hope that's what everyone was expecting. Do you have any questions?
Lisa,
Yes.
I've got a question. The $10 million in operating reserve, we all know we're gonna have to spend a lot of money to clean up this leachate. Don't know how much. Can this be used for that?
Yes, we could borrow from it.
Thank you.
Go one step further with that. We can borrow from it, she said. Clarify what you mean.
Well, I mean, sure you can use it. The plan is that at the end of the use and support agreements come January 25th, that $10 million that's in an operating reserve now is in there due to the bond indenture. So the bonds are going to be paid off, so we no longer have to hold that operating reserve. The plan has always been that that will be transferred into the landfill closure fund. So you have a total of $16 million. We accrue landfill closure fund costs every year, and as of this last January, they were a little above $16 million. So that's why if you're needing to use any of it, I would recommend that you borrow from it and then pay yourselves back, but you just, we've got to keep a landfill closure fund at least funded to what we are, have accruing on our books and the capacity used, basically. But I think we have room in other areas that certainly we'll be taking into consideration for it. So I don't think anybody needs to panic.
I hear a motion since the financial report subject to audit be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Yeah. All right.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Jeffrey Murray with HDR, I'm Senior Project Manager. Hope to provide the board with an update on the current status of the leachate project and progress that we've made, and I'll do my best to answer questions that the board may have following the presentation. I know I've had a lot of questions sort of already directed towards me here this morning. I'll do my best to answer those as we go along, the best that I can. So an update on the unusual conditions. You heard from us last month that we were focused focusing efforts on pumping from cell 5 to remove the excess leachate elevations within the cell 5 landfill. We've communicated to the state that we are not pumping from cell 6 currently. We want to focus, again, our efforts on cell 5, which have the most egregious elevation violations of our compliance with respect to leachate within the cell 5 footprint. Since February, approximately a month, we've been pumping 50,000 gallons per day from the site. Most of that is from cell 5. We still have some ongoing flow from cells 1 through 4. But the staff has focused their operations and fine-tuned their system operations so that we can remove 50,000 gallons per day. And that is all we're permitted to discharge currently through HRSD through the existing connection. But over that time, we've dropped the elevation 3 to 4 feet within cell 5. It's required more progress than we'd anticipated, but we don't expect that trend to continue with ongoing pumping, as the initial few feet may have been easier to remove, and as we get into more dense waste, it may slow down a little bit, but it's a positive trend. And we're tracking that accurately through the use of data loggers that are installed in some of the cleanouts, both on the north side and the south side. We're recording those elevations on a monthly or weekly basis, analyzing them on a weekly basis. They're recorded on a daily basis each day. So we're tracking those trends accurately. The issue with the existing transducers on the pump stations themselves, they have a set range on those pumps for operating the pumps during normal operations. The elevations within the landfill are outside the range of those transducers operating. So we've installed additional transducers that have a little more accuracy with respect to elevation, and we're able to track those here and provide progress at DEQ. We will be installing another transducer within cell 6 for ongoing management and observation of leachate levels within cell 6. But as we have not been pumping from cell 6, leachate elevations and leachate there continues to accumulate. So that is your active operating area where you're currently landfilling. Waste materials has got more of an active footprint than cell 5. So we're not getting ahead. We're making progress in reducing the impact on cell 5, but we're still accumulating leachate in cell 6. So 50,000 gallons per day, as it currently stands with HRSD, is not going to remedy this condition. We're making progress, but we're also losing ground on the cell 6 condition. So additional actions need to be taken, which we'll talk further here of what our recommended actions are to continue to remedy this and move the ball forward, if you will.
How high is this?
Cell 6 is about 10 feet above the liner system currently. And we're still able to monitor that through the existing transducers that are within on the cell 6 pumps. But at some point that gets up to 12, 13 feet, then those transducers will be out of range as well. Our goal is to be able to pump from 5 and 6 here in the short term to lower both, but 50,000 a day is...
So roughly 15 feet below cell 5?
Yes, yeah, or more. Yeah. We've been coordinating routinely with DEQ. We have provided, at their request, a preliminary response schedule. That response schedule is based on providing some additional pre-treatment to increase the discharge rate to 200,000 gallons per day to the Nansen treatment plant. That schedule included or assumed that we'd be able to have a pre-treatment operation and discharge increase by December of this year with a fully operating additional pre-treatment requirements, and that we would be able to remedy the condition about a year and a half from now, November of 2019. They responded to that with the notice of violation that we received just yesterday and asked for a follow-up meeting, which, like you had alluded to, and we'll be able to fine-tune that schedule a little bit here, but that was our initial assessment based on what we knew at the time in February. We've been providing bi-weekly status updates to DEQ with respect to actions taken by staff for improvements to the pumping system and controls, as well as elevation of leachate that we have removed. Just last week, we have provided DEQ with a response to additional information that we requested, which asked about more immediate remedies that we're considering in addition to pre-treatment. We've identified that we are proceeding with pump and haul alternatives analysis and costing for pump and haul to additional facilities, as well as aerosolization as a potential treatment option for leachate disposal. And I can talk about that a little bit more later on in the presentation. DEQ was also asked about elevated temperature conditions within the landfill. As some of you may recall, 2011, elevated temperatures were being observed within some of the landfill gas collection wells. Analysis was done, gas collection system was shut down at that time. Additional soil cover was placed over the landfill to prevent potential fires, to mitigate potential intrusion of air from the gas collection system. And we subsequently restarted the gas collection system, but temperatures remain elevated within the landfill. And that's due to a number of complicated digestion or degradation that's going on in the landfill. DEQ has expressed concern because of their experience with the Waverly landfill, which has had elevated temperatures much higher than what we've observed here at the SPSA regional landfill, as well as leachate accumulation within that landfill. And their waste management is working through a process to remedy that, and it's been a couple of years already, and there's still additional time to remedy. So they've asked those questions. We've been able to address those, but that will probably be an ongoing concern and an ongoing discussion with DEQ with respect to the elevated temperatures within cell 5 and cell 6 as we move forward. And they've also asked us to look at landfill stability. As you have placed waste and saturated conditions, you're changing the characteristics of the solid waste within your landfill. We have assessed stability of the landfill for factor safety 1.6. 1.5 is typically required, and what was actually included in the design report. So as of the current conditions, we are still stable. There isn't a risk for slide or failure of the landfill liner system or the waste within it. And there haven't been any observed seeps from the landfill face, which would be indicative of additional storage of leachate within the landfill. At the time that we put the slides together for your packets, we had not received the notice of violation from DEQ. We received it yesterday at 4 o'clock. They essentially outlined the different regulatory requirements of the SPSA's landfill and asked for additional meeting here immediately with DEQ staff and SPSA staff and ourselves to discuss the remedy and schedules and potential dates for compliance. We anticipate that following this notice of violation will be a consent order with an agreement for compliance and remedying the unusual condition of leachate volumes.
Jeff, just to interrupt you real quick, the consent order for those of us aren't as well versed as you, that's sort of the roadmap for how everything will be, or how DEQ blesses the correction of the condition and the timing in which we have to do it. Is that right?
Correct, yeah. It's a written agreement between state and SPSA for remedying the situation. It provides a little more flexibility with respect to operational changes that may otherwise require going back and getting a permit modification. So it provides some coverage and some flexibility for both the state and SPSA to help mitigate the issue.
So it's ultimately kind of a, notice of violation sounds kind of scary to, someone like me in the legal world, but that being the preliminary step in getting to the consent order is kind of actually a good thing, because then we'll know exactly what we're working with and the time again which we have to do it, and the inherent flexibility associated with it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's just how I've come to understand it.
Correct. Update on actions taken. We have continued coordination with HRSD and the City of Suffolk. We made a request to increase the pump rate from the site to 300,000 gallons per day. The City of Suffolk has assessed that through their system and identified that they could accept that discharge rate, except for during wet periods or wet weather, and they just asked that we would reduce the discharge rate to 39,000 gallons per day, which is currently the HRSD's permit for average daily flow for a 24-hour period after one inch storm event, just because during wet weather conditions you have a lot of other facilities that are tied into the Suffolk system, HRSD system, which are removing rainwater and flow, and the hydraulic demand on the system would not be able to take the additional flow from the regional landfill. So the landfill has the opportunity to delay pumping during that period of time. We've got storage capacity on site within the lagoons to be able to accommodate that. HRSD is reviewing our application for that additional flow. We've got some final documentation on hydraulic analysis of the existing pump station that's being finalized this week. So hydraulically, they may be able to accept 300,000 gallons per day, but the quality of the leachate discharge is still going to be the overriding critical path and factor which would allow us to discharge more. The SWIFT program, which is the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow. As you probably read in the paper and heard through other correspondence, this HRSD is moving towards this program and implementing a demonstration project at the Nansen plant next year. That program will likely and most assuredly will further restrict the quality of leachate that's coming from industrial and commercial customers that discharge to the Nansen facility. And it may have will have long-term impacts on our leachate disposal options from the SPSA regional landfill. There are certain parameters that are typically within landfill leachate that their system would have difficulty moving, and they're moving towards re-injecting treated wastewater to groundwater. And there are certain parameters that they've identified that may be problematic for SPSA to meet their effluent criteria. So we are proceeding with doing some additional sampling of our existing leachate quality. We're going to provide that to HRSD in addition to the pre-treatment study we're completing, and ask them to do a site-specific study of SPSA's leachate, perhaps be able to get some flexibility or additional increase in our discharge based on known constituents and parameters that are in leachate, but also looking forward to 2018, what constraints may be with respect to continuing to discharge the Nansen plant.
Let me see if I heard you right. Okay, we've got the problem, we're dealing with the problem. HRSD has a new thing they want to do. Down the road somewhere, I guess depends on their budgets, constraints, and whatever the new president does and everything else, how much they'll do, but say they go through with this program, it sounds like a wonderful thing to do. They're going to probably put more restraints on what the condition of the leachate is from us to them, right?
Correct.
Is that what you said?
I would say it would be more restrictive to what we currently have.
So yeah, you got to keep that in mind in the future. If no matter, once you solve your problem, somewhere down the road, they're still going to be stricter on us. So we might want to make sure whatever we do can take care of that too, because if they're going to make us drinking water and be putting it into the ground in our aquifer, we surely don't want it to be bad. So whatever we do, let's don't be short-sighted in our decision. Let's look down the road and make sure that we capture, okay, if they make it stronger, we've already taken that into consideration. If we're going to spend money, let's fix the system that will handle that too. That was the other thing.
Additional actions are through coordination with HRSD. They've identified 4 other locations which we could pump and haul to within their system. Each of these 4 locations, the Washington Pump Station in Chesapeake, York River area, Hampton, the Boat Harbor Terminal on Terminal Ave, the Newport News, and the Patrick Henry Pump Station, Newport News. Each of those systems flow to a different treatment plant. So their treatment plants have a similar discharge or effluent criteria for SPSA in the 50,000 gallons per day. And that's based on our chemical oxygen demand strength of leachate. They could accommodate, right now, flows up to 250,000 gallons per day into their system if we pump and haul to these other 4 locations and continue to discharge up to 50,000 gallons per day to Nansen. We have prepared request for proposals or an invitation for bid that we will review with staff here this week for seeking contractors' bids for hauling disposal for up to 200,000 gallons per day using a temporary loadout station which will be erected and installed at the landfill, and we could be commencing those operations as soon as a month. Again, what we believe is needed to make progress on the watering of this 50,000 gallons a day which we currently have to abide by with respect to discharge. Is not making enough progress. It's solving one problem, cell 5, but we're adding additional issues on cell 6, and we need to move faster than we currently are. So that's something we are anticipating moving forward with this week.
I've got another question. Looking at that. See, I don't think that HRSD is a bunch of different systems, and they are. That's something, really never dealt with it that way, so I didn't know that. But is the restriction we're having at the Nazarene facility, that's because of what they want to do?
No. Currently, the 50,000 gallons per day right now is their current restrictions under their current permit.
Are they limited there? I mean, are we pushing the limit of that facility? And the reason I ask that is if they'll, as being one system, the way I looked at it before, if they can take 50,000 gallons at the other 4 places and 50,000 gallons out, why can't they take it at one? Or does that put it?
Yeah, it'll be the mass, it'll be the loading on their individual treatment plants. COD, which is a measure of biological demand using a chemical process on your constituents, it's not easy to remove, and that's why they don't want it. What they can do is they can spread that load around to other facilities that can handle it, but they could not handle 250,000 gallons of our current leachate strength without additional pretreatment to reduce it, then possibly increase our flows in Anson or to some of the other stations that might be a little bit closer.
That's a question, thank you.
Have they approved our application for this additional 200,000 at the current chemistry?
At the current chemistry, it would be approvable. We have to make a final proposal to them because they're going to have to modify their existing discharge agreement. But they've identified those 4 locations at our current chemistry.
They verbally said it's going to be okay, but they haven't approved the official application yet.
Correct.
They know the chemistry that we're running?
It's tested monthly, and they've done other additional testing as well. The SWIFT testing, the additional sampling that we'll be doing, that's looking at the long-range impact of the SWIFT program on our leachate. So to move the ball forward, we're proposing to do temporary haul and disposal operations, and at the same time proceed with design for a temporary or permanent loadout station at the facility. At a minimum, that would serve as a long-term backup for your leachate disposal, but it could be your alternative that is most cost-effective long-term. That will require plant engineering design, electrical design for modifications to the existing pump system, and then site plan and permit approvals through a DEQ in the city of Suffolk.
As I understand the system, where are you going to put this loadout? The loadout's going to have to come after the pond, right?
Correct, yeah, it has to be after
So
treatment.
you're going to have to set something up, after it's, okay.
Yeah, so our intent is to use the existing infrastructure that is there, including the existing pumps that are currently pumping to the Nansen facility, add VFDs to them so we could slow down the speed and use those to fill 2 tanker trucks at a time, approximately 6,500 to 7,000 gallons a tanker. What we've identified through the IFP that we drafted is some temporary secondary containment devices that the contractor would need to procure or subsequent purchase that they would park the tanker trucks on for offloading.
So when it comes out of the sediment pond, you're going to have to put some kind of valve arrangement.
For the temporary, we could pull. Yeah, for the temporary, we could pull directly out of the pond using diesel pumps. And again, that's long range. You're not going to want to do that for years because it's consuming fuel. But it's a short-term solution, and then the longer-term solution is to modify the electric system pumps and get a permanent station permitted and constructed.
Okay, thank you.
Concurrent with that, we're also putting together a design for a new SCADA system to bring this system up to state of practice with respect to being able to monitor and measure existing pump operations and head within the landfill cells, as well as levels of leachate within the storage lagoons. The previous SCADA system was stopped being operational, I believe, in the 2009-2010 timeframe. Again, that was observation and some control, but it wasn't a full SCADA system. What we've worked through with Henry and what he would like to have at the site is operation control of all 8 pump stations within cells 5 and 6, the lift station that takes leachate from cells 5 and 6, and also control and observation of the treatment lagoons, and most importantly, the elevation within those lagoons and alarm conditions. Current systems being operated in a manual mode, basically when staff is on site, you don't have those preventative measures and alarms, other than some local auto alarms, but you don't have a fully functioning alarm system. So our intent is that we've got a 30% design set that we'll review with staff, and then the next step will be, if you select a contract to procure, or do you go through design build process with that.
But you're going to consider in your alarm system that, I want to say that it goes to some type of wireless thing to where it goes to Henry or whoever it is that's going to be getting it and get it on his phone?
Yeah, if Henry's having trouble sleeping at night, you can open up his tablet and see how the pumps work. Yeah, that would be the intent, similar to most wastewater treatment plants, or with communications, direct communications or through radio communications, but to the cloud essentially, so that data is available to Henry and other designated staff that would have operational control to make a decision that, we're going to shut that pump off.
It backs up to the executive director once it gets to him.
He might be third on the list, right? I might be fourth.
Mr. Chairman, they sound like operational questions. Just saying.
I give up.
Which I am interested also.
Oh, but I'll have some more in a couple minutes.
This is just a schematic of kind of the temporary load-up condition that we're looking at. Again, pumping from the settling lagoon to the clarifying lagoon, and hard piping with diesel pumps to two containment areas. We would locate those within the existing gravel access roadway, and this would allow us to construct a permanent load-up structure concurrent with the temporary load-up operation. So we would have in order to get to 200,000 gallons per day, with turnaround time and delivery and offloading, we're going to need to have two locations available to minimize the amount of queuing of trucks waiting to fill. Fill time's about 15-20 minutes or so if we're looking at a 400 gallon per minute fill rate, but still a fair amount of time for travel distance to some of the locations and other constraints at the discharge locations. Other considerations, I know we've already discussed here this morning a little bit about the status of the conditional use permit. We knew that was being held until there was resolution with notice of violation and likely a consent order with DEQ on remedying the unusual conditions. We've got a pre-treatment study that is wrapping up. I wish I had better news with respect to aeration, increasing the aeration of the existing system. The COD is a stubborn parameter. Aeration, anaerobic treatment has not shown to be effective in reducing COD concentrations. Carbon absorption, however, is. We could add carbon, activated carbon to the system or a packed tower and reduce COD concentration. At least from the bench scale testing is showing reduced COD concentrations where we could go up to 100,000 gallons per day in Nansemond. To get to the next threshold of 150, 200,000 gallons per day, I don't think we were there with available technology to get below 500 milligrams per liter or whatever that bar HRSD would set from COD concentration. So carbon absorption has promise, but we're looking at a penny or two per gallon for treatment and replacement of carbon, compared to what you're paying now for disposal and throughput through Suffolk system is less than a cent. So it would be an increase in your treatment, but it might be more effective than hauling all 200,000 gallons off-site for disposal. You cut that volume in half and maybe reduce some of the pump and haul costs. And that could potentially be the long-range treatment option for the site once the issue is remedied. We should be below 100,000 gallons per day from a generation standpoint, long-term, once the conditions remedied. So our recommendation would be, and this is coming with a draft report at the end of the month, but our recommendation would be to pilot some carbon filtration towers at the site with HRSD's concurrence to treat the effluent that's going to Nansemond and see how effective that truly is and what the actual operating cost would be. And then aerosolization is an emerging technology that uses air and pumps to oxidize leachate or other wastewaters. Creates a mist, so that water molecules are allowed to evaporate, and then the other particles will fall back into a contaminator. So your metals, organics, other things that aren't purely water that can be evapotranspirated would fall back and contain and then be accumulate over time. So you would generate a brine material out of that leachate, but you could pass through that water several times through the aerosolization equipment to reduce your water. It's, again, emerging technology. There's one facility in North Carolina and one in Virginia that have been permitted to use this as a demonstration project. Would require additional leachate storage to serve the aerosolization equipment and other infrastructure improvements. We're reviewing right now with a vendor for the demonstration project up to 100,000 gallons per day or more of leachate. You've got to find a spot on the site that makes sense logistically, environmentally, and we get power and storage to it. So that's in process. We'll have a further update at the next board meeting, but that, that again could be a long-term disposal option versus continue to pump to HRC facilities, even with or without retreatment. That's all I have. I'm sure you have some questions.
I'm afraid to ask one.
I'm not.
Only policy questions.
Sir, I thank you for your presentation. I've got several questions. The first is regarding the NOA, and are there potential fines or punitive ramifications from DEQ or any other source associated with the NOA or any other condition?
I'll handle that, Jeff. NOV, notice of violation.
NOV, I'm sorry, I should know better.
It's new lingo for me too, unfortunately. Yes, there'll be, you can almost guarantee there'll be civil penalties. Warren, correct me if I speak wrong, it's not typical that there would be exorbitant budget crushing penalties, but in typical situations they've been meaningful, but not, again, exorbitant.
Well, that doesn't mean a lot to me. No offense intended,
Sure.
What's meaningful but not exorbitant to me would be not the same for SPSA. That deals in a much bigger budget than my household.
Do you have a more specific question? Because I don't know if I can give you a more specific answer. There will be civil penalties. What they will be is uncertain at this point.
Okay.
But
Are there
the
civil-
DEQ is more interested in making sure the problem goes away than finding the organization out of existence.
Are there civil penalties associated with simply having received the NOV? Do we know they're coming, or are we just thinking they're coming?
We're just thinking they're coming.
Okay. And I presume there would be civil penalties for failure to comply with the consent order as well.
If we fail to comply, I think that's right. I'm looking at my partner, Warren Tisdale, who's our land use expert and knows more about this than I do. If you'd like to direct your questions to him.
Okay, so for our own planning purposes, financial planning purposes, what type of penalties are we looking at?
Well, then let me just stop here. If we're going to get into and certainly we can, if we want to get into a discussion about what we can expect from a legal recourse from the DEQ, I'd rather do that in closed session because it involves legal analysis and assumptions and sort of guesses that I don't think are appropriate right now for public because we received this NOD last night and are still trying to digest it. It's consistent with what we expected, but we haven't fully had the opportunity to fully assess the implications and what type of ramifications. Again, I'll reiterate, DEQ is much more concerned with remedying the problem than finding the organization.
All right.
If we want to get into specific questions, let's go into closed session and talk about it.
Then I'll go to my next question and see if this one's appropriate. What are the costs associated with the remediation that this gentleman has just described? To cure the problem? Anybody answer that question?
Or get it hit next month.
Well, certainly we're learning more each day. obviously. We'll know more next month if we're able to receive price proposals, competent, responsive price proposals on the hauling. But you're probably looking at 8 to 10 cent range per gallon for hauling, compared to what you're paying, now, which is $0.015 total with Suffolk's fees and the cost for HRC treatment.
What's the big number?
Well, the big number is if you want to put your own treatment plant in. That would be a big number, and that may be part of our recommendation. Is if we know that HRSD's constraints are going to get tighter, and your pumping and hauling long term is not sustainable, then we could look at an alternative treatment plant.
So we don't know enough information yet to answer the question. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the pre-treatment, we know we have a general idea of what the carbon would add on to cost, but again, that gets you to maybe 100,000 gallons per day. Still going to be reliant on pumping and hauling for the revenue. Yeah, you're welcome.
I've got one just to follow up on what you asked. The things I've been reading, I've tried to do a lot of reading on because I don't have a lot of education about waste treatment facilities. What I've been reading indicates to me that this just isn't, we have the water problem, but the sanitation district facilities all over are all going to want to have cleaner stuff coming into them than what landfills want to give them. So apparently this is that part of it, not the water part, that's our problem.
Yeah, this is not a local problem. This is countrywide, where treatment plants are reducing. They're getting pinched on the backside for the discharge to the water bodies. They're passing that pain, if you will, onto their customers. And landfills are a industrial source of wastewater that has high strength of certain parameters that are difficult to remove.
You said it better than me, because that's what everything I've been reading is indicating. All these treatment facilities are going to start getting tougher. So we have to, again, think about the future. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an observation first, or a suggestion, and then I'll get to a few questions. First, as we call this an unusual condition, I think it's appropriate as we move forward to describe it in reports and public communications as whatever else we might appropriately call it, whether that's the leachate, NOV, or something, but we should call it what it is. We were referring to it as an unusual condition in somewhat of a pre-enforcement status. So if I'm wrong on that, I'll be okay with it, but I just want to call it what it is moving forward. On that note, remind us, what is the usual condition? What would you normally expect the water level to be, just for everybody's benefit?
Yeah. Regulations, both federal and state, require that you maintain leachate levels to no more than 12 inches or 30 centimeters, but 12 inches above your liner system elevation.
When we detected it, it was at how many feet?
When we detected it, it was in excess of 30 feet in the sub locations in cell 5. Again, cell 5 has a high point in the middle and 4 low points, so it's 4 quadrants. So at the center of the landfill is, the base liner system is 14, 16 feet higher than it is at the low points. But at the low points, we're in excess of 30 feet.
And we've lost the functionality of the SCADA system, we think, around 2009, 2010.
I believe so. I wasn't involved then, but I believe that's about the time that kind of gave up on the system.
Are you able to speculate then that we were at the normal required condition at that time, 2009, 2010?
I don't know for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, that SCADA system there was observations of conditions, but not fully functioning control and observation.
Okay, thank you. 3 questions I'll put together. On the 50,000 gallon per day pump and haul to 4 treatment plants, again, would you state the duration of that? How long should we expect to do that? Well, I'll go through it. How long will we do that? How many trucks per day should we anticipate? And on the whole route proposed, will those trucks come from Bowers Hill and go back towards Bowers Hill?
On the logistics, I don't know. It's going to be up to the individual contractors. But for duration, we're looking at what we've termed right now in the draft is a minimum 4 months of the extended hauling. And at that point, they will be able to measure the success of the dewatering. Minimum 4 months, and then we're going to have the ability to extend that if needed. But the complete remedy of the unusual condition may take up to a year or more, reasonably. The number of vehicles are, they can pump, haul 7,000 gallons per day to each of those locations, and they're looking at timing, and we're probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 tanker trucks that will be servicing the facility.
No, but you'll take about 30 trips, 7,000 gallons.
Correct, yeah, so there'll be 3 or 4 trips, some of the locations a little further away, and then traffic constraints that they may have to have additional tankers going to those locations.
Thank you. This may be a question for Lisa or for Bucky, but how, along the lines of Mr. Arnold's questions, how much have we spent to date that we were otherwise not expecting to spend on this problem?
I think on the leachate maintenance, we're about 65,000, just on replacing the pump stations and stuff. Then, of
Our
course,
time, I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. I apologize. Our time, legal's time, Jeff's time, all in, money on this problem that we had not budgeted for.
I don't have all those numbers yet.
More than $100,000?
Yes.
Okay. How much do you anticipate we will spend along that scale by the end of this fiscal year on this problem?
We don't have those numbers yet.
Okay. Can you speculate the likely rate impact in the next fiscal year, just specifically related to this problem?
No, but I should be able to have something for you next month on that.
Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I'll just comment that that is another reason why we're saying we're going to keep the tipping fee at $125 in July, but then as soon as we get our arms around everything else, then we'll know what we can reduce it down to. I mean, it should, if God willing, I mean, it's going to go down.
But a reduction will carry a week.
It could occur sooner, but certainly by January 20th.
That's what.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, this SWIFT program frightens the heck out of me. And, Bucky, is there anything we can do to learn more about it, or influence its effect, or find out get a better picture of how it might ultimately affect us? And can we push back on this sucker a little bit?
We're working with HRC to find out. I have not provided the information to what the limits would be or parameters would be to us yet. One thing they're waiting on, I think, is the study of the 150 different items for the characterization study.
Correct. Yeah, HRC has provided a list of additional parameters outside the normal sampling analysis is required. So we're proceeding, collecting samples today, if I'm not mistaken, for that. And that will give us a starting point for them to assess, with the SWIFT program, where does SIPSA stand with respect to compliance with what they believe is going to be the constraint. Again, they haven't finalized that. There are a number of other customers that are would be impacted by this.
That's my question.
It doesn't have to mean we're a at-will customer, if you will, perhaps to HRSD. But the system that they're assessing is not only an enhancement here in the short term with the demonstration plan, but at all of their facilities are looking to implement it, except that I believe at Atlantic.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff? Yes. Last month Joe was here. What happened to Joe?
Joe is back in Charlotte. So Joe's a section manager. I had a previous commitment at another project.
Jeff is our primary
project manager.
So you'll be attending future meetings here, right?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure we have continuity within HDR, okay? You briefed this as we're losing ground, which obviously concerns me. I'm sure all the board members. Losing ground is a sound wave that bothers me. So let's talk about HDR. 10,000 people, 225 locations around the world. You've been in business for 100 years. Real impressive. Okay? How many people are working on our problem besides you, Joe?
20.
Besides you, Joe. 20 people working on it. Okay. I appreciate your considerations, but I think your presentation is shy or short in a couple areas. One is, I'd like to know what the recommendations are. I got considerations. I don't know what your recommendations are. You're our engineer, right? So tell me more. Not right now, because clearly you can't, because You don't have it in the briefing.
But, yeah, and our recommendation is to start pumping and hauling as soon as we can.
Okay.
We need to get more leachate out than is currently being discharged, because landfill is generating more than 50,000 gallons a day. Based on accumulation, it's clear that based on the accumulation that's into the landfill, they weren't pumping enough over the last several years.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, so I see some timelines in your presentation here. You know lightning and thunder? You know what happens lightning and thunder?
Sure.
Flash to bang. Yeah. I think your flash to bang is too long. Okay? When I see months instead of weeks, I think we're not moving fast enough. So what's your impediment? What's your impediment to moving faster? Because I think it needs to be moved faster. I think months is too long.
As far as remedying,
Getting moving on the recommended solution. Because
the
I know it comes in phases. If it's pumping, why aren't we pumping now?
and I'll do my best to answer that, and in consultation with staff, and I certainly invite Henry to answer. We have a list, we prioritized issues that at the site we need to fix the pumps, because the pumps weren't operating. We couldn't even begin to effectively do water until the pumps were fixed. Pumps have been addressed, they're operating now. We began immediate coordination with HRSD to see what we have flexibility with the current infrastructure to discharge more. So that took time to set up and get answers back. The answers we were getting back is there's not a whole lot of flexibility there, folks. Come back to us with some recommended options, and then we'll go from there. So we've had 2 coordination meetings and other conversations with HRSD.
You see, but that's rear view mirror looking. What I want is, what's the impediments of us moving forward in weeks instead of months? Is it a contractor problem? Is it lack of design to do it? Is it lack of, whatever? I need to know what the impediments are so we can clear them out and get to a solution. Because, as you said, it's a losing proposition. So every day that we study and we think and we wring our hands, it's another inch of leachate somewhere.
Well, Jeff, use the example of pumping and hauling. Wait for us. Use that as an example as to the impediment to having it, start tomorrow.
Maybe you could pump and haul tomorrow if you wanted to do an emergency provision, sign up Oakley Logistics or Drew Transport to start hauling leachate. But if you want to do it properly, perhaps from a procurement perspective, there's a 3-step process there where you finalize the documents, get proposals in, evaluate those, and then turn them loose. But we've been in consultation with hauling companies to give us an estimate on budgetary numbers and then what are the constraints at these discharge locations. So we have a draft now that could be issued for bids, or with direction from the board, perhaps our executive director sign up a contractor. I don't know if that's in your best interest. I think your best interest is to get competitive price proposals, because it's going to be $10,000 to $20,000 a day for hauling leachate.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, the facility, the landfill site, is not currently equipped from an operational standpoint to commence pumping and hauling tomorrow. It has to be configured, and to do that, even on a temporary basis, can't be done with a snap of a finger or a wave of a magic wand. So, I'm not trying to answer Jeff's questions on his own, but I thought that was a good example to illustrate the concerns that you're rightfully raising.
Well, Trey, that's interesting. That really isn't a legal question, is it? It really isn't a legal question if you chime in.
It's not a legal question, but I've been involved in this since the minute that we all became aware of it, and I've learned a lot from Jeff and his engineers, and for them. And frankly, it's a little offensive to suggest that they aren't working hard to try and remedy this as quickly as they possibly can, because I assure you they are.
Yeah, well, no offense here. I'm just saying the flashbang is too long, and there's 10,000 people in HCR, and I don't believe enough is being done quick enough. For instance, I want to see a timeline. I want to know what the impediments are. And by the way, if it is a question of the board making the decision to start pumping right now by using a contractor through some emergency procurement, I just need to know that. The chairman needs to know that so we can call a vote and make something happen. I don't like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I want to see us move forward, Mr. Chairman. I want to see us move forward quicker than the normal pace of engineering activities, I think they can go, I think we can dual track this and get moving as more engineering studies or whatever needs to be done, needs to be done. So it's a matter of, give us the recommendations, so the board can take some action. I don't want to wait another month to have another meeting to talk about, let's do something. That's, board members, that's what I'm thinking. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I think I'm out of line here, or I'm saying something stupid, I need to hear what the other board members think.
Mr. Chairman, a question along those lines, and this may be a question for Bucky. Have we explored on the pump and haul if there is a state contract or a GSA contract or some other previously competed contract with a cooperative clause that we could already take advantage of competitive pricing that we could initiate? So that's part one. And then secondly, have we configured the site to facilitate pumping and hauling? Are we doing so now, and what's the timeline on that?
Jeff, as that, we do not have anything in place right now to do anything out there at pump and haul, other than the existing pumps that we have. There's no way to get it into a trailer or anything of that nature. He's designing that, one of the slides actually showed what he was anticipating having to do to be able to load out 2 trucks at the time. All of that is construction, it has to be done. It's not snapping fingers and it's done tomorrow. You can either do it right, or you can just do it, and then hope that you don't get more violations because you didn't do something right to start off with. Very simple.
Yeah, I think from a pump and haul perspective, even if it were an available contract that you could piggyback onto, those are really site-specific with respect to the destination and your haul locations and other constraints that may be at those. The locations that HRC has identified, 3 of them are manholes within the street. So there's logistics and pumping, at those locations and traffic control that would have to go into pricing from the haul.
It sounds like the limiting factor right now is being able to configure the site to facilitate the most efficient, responsible pump and haul. And that's a physical improvement we have to do at the landfill. That's being designed right now?
Correct.
We anticipate having that design complete by what date?
We need another 3 weeks to finish that.
And what do you think the construction time is on that?
Depends on the City of Suffolk's review period for the site plan approval process.
We have
If that's
an
60 days.
expedited bin for those types of things. I don't want everybody to know that, but.
Then we'll have to go for site plan approval as well as DEQ permit modification. Now, under the consent order, we may have flexibility. Turned off, timed off. Under the consent order, we may have flexibility on modification permit, but if it's a permanent structure, we would have to go back through. And that's why we want to leave it temporary in place while the permit is being constructed. It would not change the function of that pump and haul. It would just give a permanent facility for those, and get off the temporary diesel pumps and the temporary container.
Thank you. That's very helpful to me. My suggestion would be that at the end of the discussion or at the appropriate time on the agenda, if the board needs to take some action to authorize the executive director to, quote, do all things necessary to affect this pump and haul, physical improvements, if there's anything that you feel like needs to come back to the board next month to get this going, I would suggest that we go ahead and authorize Bucky in some general terms to be able to do all things necessary to begin that process.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make, this is an observation and not a question. And I feel like I've got to make this statement. I think there's one big gap in this discussion, in this presentation, and it goes back to what the fiscal impact of this condition will be to this organization. I don't feel like that's been addressed. Absolutely no criticism to you, sir. And please don't take that as a criticism to you. And perhaps the information is not available, but this is extremely important information that I am looking for sooner rather than later. I don't know whether we're talking about $1 million or $100 million. I've heard things like $10,000 to $20,000 a day, 8 to 10 cents a gallon, but I don't know what the overall cumulative price tag is associated with this. And I know that maybe you don't know it either, or staff doesn't know it either, but I'm looking for this information very quickly, because you have to have this in order to run an organization. And although I'm not in environmental law, a lawyer, I do know that environmental issues can be extraordinarily, sometimes catastrophically expensive. So I'm just looking for some more information, and I'm looking for it soon.
Mr. Chairman, I have an observation. I heard what Mr. Ryder said, and I have been thinking for myself for quite some time. Knowing that I'm in government and having watched government move at glacier speed, that's a term that was given to me some time ago. Government does not move very fast. This organization, I recognize a lot of these people came from private industry, and so they're used maybe to a faster pace. And I feel like we're going to need a faster pace. And so my question is, can we explore a way to take the board out of it in terms of making the decisions that normally would come before the board, authorization to do certain things? Can we appoint a committee, an oversight committee, or the executive committee become an oversight committee, so that as soon as the RFP comes back, the oversight committee can look at it, evaluate it, and say, let's do it, as opposed to it being a presentation and we have to wait for a board meeting, which might be 30 days off. I think if we're going to expedite this thing, we're going to have to liberally allow our executive people, the executive committee, to sign off on these things and report back to the board as to what's been done after it's already taken place. Otherwise, we are going to move at a glacier speed, and Mr. Sorrentino's not going to be happy, Mr. Arnold's not going to be happy, but we've got to authorize, if it's available, we've got to authorize some expedited method to get it done as soon as possible, rather than coming back to the board for every contract to be reviewed and voted on.
The problem we have there, Taylor, is that I'm going to just read to you from HB 1872, which we refer to as the Cosgrove Act, which reads as follows: the executive director of the authority shall not be permitted to execute or commit the authority to any contract, memorandum of agreement, or memorandum of understanding without an informed vote or of approval by the board. So we are constrained statutorily.
And I understood that, but these people needed to hear.
Let me say one thing.
Where's the glacier speed? You just can't beat it.
But we have done a tremendous amount of buying and purchasing and directing to be done under the emergency provision that is also part of, state law or whatever. So those things that can be done under the emergency procurement, we're not asking. We're doing it. I mean, and it's done, it's not done in 5 days or 3 days, it's done in minutes. So those things have been done, we're continuing to do it. We don't plan on stopping doing it for this particular thing, but we want it to be taken care of as quickly as possible. But when we can't do those, we have no other choice but $30,000. If it's over $30,000, I can't do it under emergency. If it's $200,000 or whatever it is, I can do it. And we have gladly done it.
Mr. Chairman, if something happens that's over $30,000, can we not call a special board meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. May I suggest that when we have something over $30,000 regarding this leachate problem, we have a special board meeting and we knock it out. Okay? But I do have a challenge from my colleague here at HCR. So 3 weeks for your next, I hear 3 weeks for the next study to be completed. Okay? My challenge to you is to do that in half that amount of time. Okay? I mean, come on, ramp it up. Okay? 10,000 people in HDR, ramp it up. Ramp it up. You guys can do it. Ramp it up. Ramp it up. The sign of a great AD is what you do when you're in trouble. We're in trouble. I needed to ramp it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, with respect to the emergency, I I would think the board would say this whole thing is an emergency if there's any concern about any procurement that you might have, is the first comment. And secondly, you mentioned that we're losing ground. I'd like to know one of your future reports, at what point does it get to where some other problems happen, like we start contaminating groundwater? If you can address that in the future, or if you know now, fine. Thank you.
Mr. Floyd?
I'd just like to, I would think that Bucky has the same executive power as the city manager has when we have a snowstorm. The city manager and the mayor discloses that we have an emergency. You can do just about anything you need to do. I think John's right on the money that this is an emergency. And I don't think you need to move forward with haste without good reason. You don't want to move haste without making the right decision. I see this as twofold. There was something, one, that we found that we've been having a problem for quite some time. It's before us now. We need to address it. But I also see a new set of rules and regulations that's in place, that's either in place or is coming, that we're going to have to deal with this issue in the future differently than we have in the past. HRSD is not going to be the answer. I think there's going to be some issues and questions brought to the table that we're not going to like. But I will say this, we don't need to know what it's going to cost us per gallon to transport it. We need to know what it's going to cost us in dollars and how much it's going to increase us cost per ton. So, when your staff is working with Bucky's staff, we need to, and the policemen, we need to transfer those 8 cents per gallon for transportation into how much is our dollar per ton going up on that explosive.
But I'd like to address that, Luke, on the volume of leachate that's within cell 5. If that were just a bathtub and we could hand calculate the actual volume that the waste is going to give up, I'd know what that volume is yesterday or 3 or 4 weeks ago. The issue is we've got a heterogeneous waste mass of ash, soil, trash, that we don't know what it's going to, what its capacity is to release that leachate under gravity. So we can draw it down, but the reason why we're tracking it so closely on a daily basis to get a better understanding of how much that waste mass is going to release through pumping. And we were conservative when we estimated initial timeframes. Honestly, we were conservative because we just didn't know. We're getting a better understanding of what that waste is going to give up. But that trend is going to probably change. From 3 to 4 feet that we saw here in the initial month, that could certainly slow down over time, as we continue to draw the leachate down. You can make estimates, but the data will tell us what we believe the quantity is.
Lisa has some of what you're talking about, we've just done,
If you pump 200,000 gallons per day for 365 days at 8.5 cents per gallon, plus we also have to pay the treatment at HRSD, it's going to be in the neighborhood of $6.7 million. And on our total tonnage, 385 tons, that's about $17 on the tipping fee.
$17 on the tipping fee.
But I would hope that over this next year, I've got other areas that I'm not just going to have to tack on this. We don't rob Peter to pay Paul in any way, but we have changes in our capital, savings in our budget.
We certainly hope for sooner than a year worth of pumping at the accelerated rate, but time to time.
So if you only do it for 4 months, third of the time, or third of the year, then we're talking 2 to 3 million.
But we don't know yet how long it's going to take.
Correct.
So you're talking about $500,000 a month.
Mr. Chairman, so we've got one number anyway, 6.7, and that's just one piece of it. So it's at least that amount over some period of time. That wasn't really what I wanted to talk about before. Now we're starting to get somewhere in terms of what the real cost of this issue is.
I am working on costs, I am trying to collect everything we can, we don't have the full picture yet.
So end of the month, the report is due, Bucky, Mr. Chairman, I guess you can see, as board members, we're certainly interested in where this is going and wanting to see this go faster rather than later. And I think getting an update a month from now is probably not going to satisfy most of us. What are the options for getting information out about progress, what we found, what's being done? I would certainly encourage regular updates as opposed to waiting until next month to find out what's going on.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've been doing is sending you all the report that we send to DQ. And that's good information and everything. Cost-wise and everything, we don't have that yet. You'll have some in the next meeting, because that's budget. It's a budget issue, and it's going to be done during the budget. Some of the other things, Jeff can, he simply can send an email that says these are the things we've done. And that can be forwarded, not a problem.
Well, I want Jeff working on the problem, not writing me a report.
Well, that's one of the things. But you have to do both reasonably. And Jeff doesn't go to sleep early at night.
He's already told me he didn't sleep.
Hold on.
Over the last, how many years, 8, 10 years, we have taken, and I don't know what your total staff is now, Bucky, compared to what it used to be. But I was talking to a couple of those members the past week, and we have stripped, and I don't know if that's the right word, so don't hold me to it, but we have taken an organization that at one time we thought we had way too many.
We had 480 in the first count.
And how many do we have now?
140 something.
So I don't know if the 480 was 100% too many, or.
We had a power plant.
Yeah, we have
And our site.
173.
Right, but let's take the power plant out, and let's look at just the very essential people that you have working for you today in the operation that we have now. Do you as the executive director, and do we as director, do we need to look at some additional engineering staff that works for SPSA on a full-time basis? I'm not saying you do, I'm not saying you don't, but I do remember that from the administration, we used to have a large staff, and we have a very small staff.
Well, I think we find out during that period of time that, as Mr. Sorrentino, he told you, he had 20 people working on it. We don't think we find one person that can do 20 jobs. And that's the reason why we no longer have an engineer on staff, because it just didn't work out as well as we thought it would. We can easily go to our contracted service and get that particular expertise that we need, because getting one person who knows everything about transfer stations and everything like that is just, it didn't prove beneficial.
I just want to put it there.
Yeah, but we are constantly reviewing staff to see whether or not additional staff are needed. We have added, we have been down lower than 145. So we are adding some people back in there. I think we've even added 1 or 2 of the landfill. But Henry's problem has been, he's never had a full staff out there in 15, 16 months he's been there, because of vacancies or retirements or people leaving to go to another job. So, but we continue to deal with this situation also. You know, truck drivers, we've always had issues with truck drivers having enough. We are constantly looking at the staffing to see whether or not there is or are other people that would be necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I second what Luke has provided here, and I think what we talked about earlier in terms of monitoring and oversight of the operations is the kind of thing that there should be staff. That certainly you're not going to hire 20 people to do all of what HDR does for you. But somebody to coordinate that stuff, somebody to make sure that there's nothing falling through the gaps. We do have a lot of things going on, but there are quite a few things that do need to be monitored. This would be one example, and certainly from a regulatory compliance, from a board confidence and a city of Suffolk confidence standpoint, this issue has certainly shaken confidence. And I think it's up to this board to make up for that and to rebuild that confidence in the overall operation, and to make sure that the things that need to get done are getting done. I think as a board, we certainly don't want to pay for something that should not be paid for, but we're coming up short. That's not good either. So, and particularly with the budget, we're in budget time. It's probably a good time to really think about what that might be, what those needs might be.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Roberts, I just want to answer your question on procurement. I have checked with the state contracts, EVA, but I haven't checked with federal, so thank you for if there are any common law contracts we could write on. The other thing is, if we were to have any emergency procurements, those would be documented, and that would certainly be part of my report back to you, that there has been. But we have not had to do any of that, because everything that we've purchased so far falls under our small purchasing guidelines, which means it's under $30,000. But certainly, I personally consider this an emergency, and if we need to get it in the middle.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back into closed session.
Why don't you go over to and then take a break? Because then you're gonna have to have it on recording to go into close.
Go into closed session. And we're gonna have a break.
I knew that. I would have been here.
Sorry.
Hey,
I move that a closed session be held for discussions regarding SPSA's available legal rights and remedies in light of the status of certain pre-commencement contractual obligations under the Waste Supply and Services Agreement between SPSA and Repower South, in accordance with Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, and B, proposals received in response to the RFP issued by SPSA for solid waste hauling and disposal services to non-municipal waste, including current status of negotiations with applicable offerors in accordance with Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A29 for the purpose of considering negotiation and award of new contracts where competition and bargaining are involved, and where discussion in open session would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy of the public body.
Your motion?
So moved.
Second. Somebody second?
That's it.
Here you go. All right, moved and second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Taking a closed session, we're taking a 10-minute break.
Virginia hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, A, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act were discussed in a closed meeting to which this certification applies, and B, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
So moved. Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now we're back in open session. Is there any other business before this group? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Aye. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No more operational questions.